Welcome to the Everyday Warriors podcast, the perfect space to speak my truth and dive into deep conversations with others. This podcast is about celebrating everyday warriors, the people who face life's challenges head on, breaking through obstacles to build resilience, strength, and courage. Join me, your host, Trudy Marie, as I sit down with inspiring individuals who have fought their own battles and emerged stronger, sharing raw, real, and authentic stories in a safe space, allowing you to explore, question, and find your own path to new possibilities. Let us all embrace the warrior within and realize that while no one is walking in your shoes, others are on this same path, journeying through life together. Please note that the following podcast may contain discussions or topics that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. I aim to provide informative and supportive content, but understand that certain things may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in need of support while listening, I encourage you to pause the podcast and take a break. Remember that it is okay to prioritize your well-being and seek assistance from trained professionals. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is the first brave step to healing. If you require immediate support, please consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or a crisis intervention service in your area. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself as you engage with the content of this podcast. Love the Everyday Warriors podcast? It would mean the world to me if you were to leave a 5-star review to ensure that the Everyday Warriors podcast is heard by more listeners around the world. You can also support the show for as little as $5 with a one-time donation or by becoming a monthly subscriber. Your contribution helps me to continue bringing you inspiring stories of everyday warriors who overcome challenges to find strength, resilience, and new possibilities in life. Head to the link to buy me a coffee and fuel the next episode. Every bit counts. If you're looking for an inspiring story of resilience, healing, and rediscovering yourself, then my book, Everyday Warrior From Frontline to Freedom, is for you. It is my memoir of hiking the 1,000-kilometre Bibbulmun Track, a journey that was as much about finding my way back to myself as it was about conquering the trail, through the highs and lows and everything in between. This book is taken from my journals and is my raw and honest experience of overcoming trauma and embracing the strength within. Grab your copy now. Just head to the link in the show notes and let's take this journey together. Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Warriors podcast. And today I have a lovely guest, Irina from Sydney. And we are going to be talking about a very sensitive topic. I will bring that up at the beginning of this episode because it may be a trigger for a lot of people. So it will be a beautiful conversation. I'm very much looking forward to it as it is something close to my heart within my family. So welcome, Irina.
A very good day, Trudy. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. I'm so glad that you offered to be a guest on the podcast. And why was that? What had you reach out to me to be here today?
Well, my topic is mostly about fostering and adoption. And then again, it also, of course, not necessarily in our case, because I wanted to foster and adopt any which way. I was just hoping that one day I'll find my partner that does it with me. So that was something I wanted to do any which way. Even as a single person, I wanted to foster and adopt further down the line if, I didn't find the partner, but thankfully I did. But then because we were both not spring chicken and he also traveled quite a bit throughout the year, it wasn't working in terms of, falling pregnant ourselves. So we actually started with fostering. And then we realized that, maybe we even need some help, and we did our IVF journey. And then I realized that a lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people don't really even talk about when they've had a miscarriage, and so many people have had them. And I would like to be on a podcast to talk about it, to say that, hey, if you actually take the time to get to know people and get to know their stories, you'll be surprised how many people have had miscarriages and how many people are struggling to fall pregnant, and what questions mean when people say, oh, you don't have any kids yet, or whatever else, that it can trigger a lot of people. So I think the more we actually talk about this subject and don't make it a taboo subject, the better.
I 100% agree with you. I think there is so much social expectation on people getting married, having children, the expectation of when that's supposed to happen in a timeline. And then, yeah, the lack of conversation around those traumatic stages that women go through or couples go through. I think even then, often women are the ones that obviously have the miscarriage or the stillbirth or whatever the case may be. But we also forget about the dads in that situation as well. And, for every pregnancy, there are two parts to that story.
Yeah, oh, I couldn't agree more. Also, in terms of not just talking about it, because let's face it, we women might talk even more about it than a partner, but also as a partner, to see your loved one going through, the physical pain, it's still the emotional pain for both of us. So there's, yeah, no doubt about it that men need to be more included in everything. Even, I mean, as they say, there's postnatal depression for women, but a lot of men actually have very similar feelings right after having had a baby in the family. Yeah.
Totally understand. So tell me more about how you started your fostering journey.
Yeah, actually, I'm an expat child, so I actually moved quite a bit with my family at a very young age, and I saw, a lot of poverty around the world, but also, that maybe it wasn't very equal in the whole wide world, and you had a lot of people also very rich. So I saw the differences in families and in lifestyles, but what I had really not ever heard about was, until I read a book, A Child Called It, at the age of 15 while we lived in America. And it actually talked about the physical and emotional abuse from a mother to her own child. And that was for me an eye opener. I always thought, oh, if people get abused, it's by, strangers or people they don't know, or maybe the extended family. But I never, ever even had heard of a mother abusing her child. I was really protected in many ways. And so that book stuck with me. And I thought, wow, fostering, never even heard of fostering until that day. And I thought, okay, that's something I would love to do one day. So I was 15. And then, life goes on and you finish school, and I went into aviation, and it took me a while to find my partner. So I was already in my 30s when I met my future husband. And then he lived in Australia. So I decided, okay, all right, I'll come all the way over to Australia. And then I was on a spouse visa and I couldn't work. So that was for the first time in my life that it was like, oh, pause. And I thought, okay, he traveled a lot. And then I just got busy looking in all the local papers, reading whatever I could get my hands on. And then I saw all these ads for foster carers. And I was like, wow, I'm originally from Germany, and I had never even seen that in Germany in a paper. And I was like, wow, fostering is really big here and people can apply. Wow, okay, let's do this. So I called my husband, who again was overseas, and I told him about the idea, and he was like, oh, but we just got married. Aren't we gonna have our own kids? And I was like, yeah. But until that happens, why don't we foster? And yeah, that's how we got started. So we actually became foster carers, and the first two children I actually had on my own here at home anyway, because again, he was traveling. So he, popped in and out, and I just loved it. And that was in 2000, so we've been doing it for 25 years now. In the meantime, he also got posted to China, Shanghai, and then also to Singapore. So we were a few years abroad, in total 6, 7 years. And we also fostered in Singapore. And then we came back here in 2008. continued fostering, and also while in Singapore, we adopted a Singaporean baby and then had our own child through IVF, while also having a miscarriage, and we also had a stillborn. And then we came back here to Australia and we continued fostering. And then one little girl couldn't be reunited with birth family, and we adopted her as well. So I'm also here really to talk about the fact that, sure, every state and territory has its own rules, unfortunately, and it's not very streamlined. But, adoption is possible, and it has become more and more possible, especially in New South Wales. So a lot of people don't know that.
Wow, what a journey. Like just trying to take that all in, that you have literally been through it all. So you've married your husband, you've decided to foster, being, an expat living in Australia, and you take on that whole thing. Then you move countries and then you start this whole journey of parenthood, literally going through, I think, every aspect that you possibly could in that time. So let's start at the beginning, like obviously with the fostering. Did you adopt the child in Singapore before you started trying to have your own children?
No, we had already tried pretty much, ever since we got married, because we knew we weren't spring chicken. So we started when I arrived here in Australia, and then nothing really happened. So we fostered here. Then he said, okay, let's move to Shanghai. So we did. So there was no such thing of fostering in China. There's either orphanages or nothing. And then we moved to Singapore, and I met a lady there who was married to an Australian. She was Singaporean. And we became the first Caucasian couple in Singapore to foster as well, because we said, well, we're already authorized in Australia. They approved us right away, and we started fostering there. Then we realized, okay, it wasn't happening with falling pregnant, and we had tried IVF in Australia before. So we then got in contact with an IVF clinic in Singapore. We went through the process and through the cycles, and then I fell pregnant, but I lost it quite early on. But I thought, okay, it actually, was like, all right, my body got kick-started. It knows what to do. Great, so I was actually quite upbeat after that. So it's like, I took it in a positive. And again, we continued fostering. And then eventually I did fall pregnant again. No, we actually then had our son first. And he was born almost 19 years ago. This Sunday he has his birthday. And then we still had eggs frozen, and we actually had quite a few, but then they always say, when you not different, when you thaw them, then normally 50% don't make it, or at least that was a statistic then. I'm sure it has changed since then. But we thought, okay, then let's thaw all of them and see what happens. And actually, there were a lot of good eggs, and we put one in, and it developed beautifully, and then it didn't. So, and that was when we actually realized that something was massively wrong with the baby, closer to the 3 months mark. And it was then, I'm very open about it. It had a syndrome that was so severe that it actually, and we did several amniocentesis to double check if it's really true, because I thought, hey, it took me so long to fall pregnant. I really don't want to abort or anything. So I also want to clarify that it's maybe not a full stillborn like for some other people, but we actually went through a lot of tests to really make sure that there was something so, let's say, severely not right with the baby, that it also wouldn't have had survival chances afterwards. So it was already an 80% chance that it would be stillborn at full term. And then there was another 10% chance that it wouldn't survive the next year. And we really had to think of our other 2 kids that we already had. By that time, we had the child that we also adopted from Singapore. That was just before I had our IVF baby. And then, we had to think about that one with our families in Australia and in Germany, where we thought, okay, if this child cannot walk, cannot talk, and maybe has to be on oxygen for the long flights and this and that. So we made a, consensus decision that, all right, we would terminate the pregnancy. So I had to give birth, and it was then a stillborn. So it's not maybe as stillborn as some other people would say. And I know people have their thoughts about, terminating or not. But for us, it was really looking at what are the chances of life after going through the whole thing. And then if it is a child that is so sick that it's mostly going to be in hospital for the first year, any which way, if it survives the birth, that then we thought, well, that will have an impact on our other two kids and on everything and everybody in our families abroad and near. So we then decided, yeah, that would be, and we stand behind our decision in that sense, where we thought, okay, we could focus on the other two and also keep focusing on other vulnerable kids that needed a home, which, since then has been about 80 kids so far in 25 years.
Wow. Look, I just admire your courage and vulnerability in sharing what must have been such a difficult decision for both you and your husband in having to even just come to that conclusion, but doing it in such a beautiful way that you weren't just considering like your thoughts and the child's, you were considering your whole entire family and the long-term impact that something like that can have on everybody's lives. And I think it's really important to clarify here that people will always have their opinions and their judgments, but until you've been in that particular position yourself, you cannot say what you would or wouldn't do in certain circumstances.
Well, they can say it, they can think it, but we have to live through it. So at the end of the day, I knew that my husband would still travel a lot. I knew that I had, two kids in Singapore by myself, really, because I didn't have family there either. So, it's not an easy decision to make by all means. And trust me, we really slept on it before we did this. But yeah, we still, even to this day, believe that it was the right thing, because we could therefore then focus on all the other kids that also needed a home. And, we wouldn't have done that then.
I totally understand. So going back to, obviously you said your son is about to turn 19 and you had him via IVF. Tell me what that experience was like, obviously going through the process, discovering that you were pregnant and then carrying that baby full term.
Well, let's just say that the first baby that we adopted from Singapore, she was actually quite premature, and when she was born, they weren't so sure how she would manage and how she would turn out. And then when our son was born through IVF, we were just happy that, of course, I was pregnant, and because the firstborn was, well, the first adopted child was 29 weeks old when she was actually born. I think I became really relaxed when I hit 29 weeks, because I thought, if I have another one like that, I'll be okay. So until 29 weeks, especially after having experienced one miscarriage before, I was just, cautious in sharing with too many people and also getting too excited just in case it didn't work out. But I was also relaxed because I knew that on one hand, we will always fill our homes with kids, because I've realized that there were plenty of kids that needed a stable home. And so I knew that I would always fill my house with kids. That was not the question, but I just always wanted to also experience giving birth and, yeah, having a child to just, extend the family. So once I hit 29 weeks, I was even more relaxed, because I thought, okay, then, whatever happens, it's meant to be. And it was actually a full pregnancy, full term, and it all went really well. So all good.
And how has he grown up with this myriad of other siblings in his life, like whether that's through fostering or adoption or his older adopted sister? Like, how has that been even for him?
Let's just say that when they were little, I also think that fostering is, in my opinion, a great experience for kids to experience. Okay, so even though, sure, I think parenting is not an easy job, period. So if you parent your own kids or other people's kids and, create a family in all kinds of different ways, it's still parenting. So parenting is not easy by any means. So when they were all little, they probably, were just like, the kids at that age, they don't see race, they don't see color, they don't see nothing. They just see another playmate. So, and of course, I think through the fostering, our kids have become quite empathetic and compassionate. I think this is because, obviously you're not born with empathy and compassion. You need to learn it. You need to have it role modeled. And I think just for them to see what these kids have been through, either through, the households and the stories that they've shared, I think it has made our kids grow up a lot faster and understand that, hey, there are kids with a whole lot other needs than their own. Would I say that it has lasted all the way now that there are 3 teenagers? Not always. There's still selfish teenagers at times when I'm thinking, okay. So if you would ask him, he probably would have said, yes. He always wanted a younger brother. So he was really happy to have some boys as foster kids join the family as well. He always said, oh, I'm outnumbered with the girls and girls are complicated. So that would be his version probably. And then again, we've asked the kids, is it okay? And they often told us, hey, when is the next one coming? So now they are older, and yes, we still foster, but it's a lot more limited because I just do a lot more now with my husband. And the last 2 kids that we had was in October, and then we actually have spent a lot of time traveling in the last 3 months and just got back, so it needs to fit in our schedule now. And I mean, now the kids are older, they do their own thing, they have their jobs and everything else. I have a 20-year-old now, a 19 and a 15-year-old, and she just started a TAFE, so they have their own lives already. They are quite independent. And now I think they wouldn't play or do as much with foster kids now. It is more that they are with me anyway. But in the past, they had a lot of playmates, so that's, they never had to babysit or anything per se. It was more that they were there showing them family life and just being a part of it. So if there was unwanted behavior, they learned pretty quickly that every unwanted behavior is an unmet need, and we need to determine what that unmet need is, and that they work with us to work that out. And if they didn't like something, or that they were like, okay, then you teach him how to do it better, how to do it differently, because wherever this child comes from, this is what it was role modeled. And if we don't like it, or we say in our house we do it differently, then you're part of that process. So we all teach them together. So I think all 3 of them are really good at redirecting behavior and actually dealing with all kinds of different things that these kids showed us on what can come through in behaviors and in thoughts and triggers. There could be loud noises that triggers a child, or a certain car color, or a police car siren, and for our kids to understand that it all comes from somewhere.
I love that. I just think that's such a beautiful process and such acceptance, because children are, like we discussed earlier, that children are way more accepting. Like, they don't discriminate against anything. It's just like there's another human being to be with. And I wish more of humanity could be like that. But going back to your adoptive daughter, and you said that she was born premature, did you have to foster her first before the adoption, or was that a straight adoption?
No, because we actually just heard about her being in hospital, actually in incubator, because she was so premature and that she will probably come up for adoption. Somebody told me that and gave me a number of a caseworker, and we were already foster carers. So I called that number, and to be honest, I pretty much almost gave up because I called like 3, 4 times and nobody ever picked up. And then I thought, oh, forget about it. And then I had this moment where I thought, well, if it does come true and we can adopt her, then, what's another phone call? It's like looking back in it, it will be like, what if I would have called one more time? And then that day somebody answered, and she said, she has just been placed with a foster family. It was an Indian foster family. And yeah, they don't know yet, but it's all now in the too hard basket to change. But would we be interested in adopting in general? And we said, yeah. They said, okay, because we only let you see it if you're willing to adopt it. And we're like, don't need to see it if it's a baby. If it's a baby that needs adoption, then doesn't matter what she looks like, it's like, and they said, okay, all right, then, all right, we'll get back to you. And then eventually they did. So Singapore is Asia for beginners and everything is super efficient. So by the time we actually then had contact, I went to see and visit the Indian family on a regular basis. They were so lovely, so nice. And they weren't interested in extending their family. They were happy to just foster short term and then move on. They had their own kids, and so they were like, oh, I was so hoping that somebody would be found to adopt her. And also because she is mixed race, and that's a bit harder to place in Singapore because they either want them full Indian or full Chinese or full Malaysian background. And so they said, okay, that's why as a Caucasian couple, we got a chat, and we're like, hallelujah, great. And she was gorgeous, absolutely. She's still stunning girl, absolutely beautiful. And so we just did the process of, not that I fully understood it, but here and there they said, okay, now you can have her for one night. And I'm thinking this is more unsettling for any baby than anything else. But okay, so we did what they told us to do. We stuck with it. And then they said, okay, now she can be placed with you. And then after about 6 months with us, it went to court and it got finalized. And we're like, what? So fast? So that's Singapore for you.
And I'm going to ask you now, like the comparison, because you then adopted a second child. Was that here in Australia? And tell me about the differences between the processes.
Yes, well, there was a different, not as efficient, but yeah. Well, she came to us for about 3 to 4 months. She was supposed to stay 3 to 4 months, and it's actually a beautiful story because she was 5 months old, and the caseworker brought her into our home. And our little boy, who at that time was 3.5, he was like, "Oh, mommy, she's beautiful." And I was like, "Yeah, I think one day I want to marry her."
Bless.
And he was just so absolutely smitten with her from the first moment. And he's like, I'm going to give her the first bottle. I am going to do, and here he was sitting as a 3.5-old. And I was like, Ricky, I mean, you got to hold the head front. I know that, mommy. I can give a bottle. So here he was sitting at 3.5, giving her the first bottle. And it was just really gorgeous to watch. And then I had to tell him that, no, she's going to go and, be reunited. And, it's like, so the whole time I was telling him that, we're just looking after her and she will be reunited. And yeah, and then it went on. And yeah, after a while, they said, okay, she won't be reunited. Would there be any possibility that maybe they have learned from past experiences to not just, because fostering was on one side and adoption was all the way on the other side, and you had two different processes to apply and all of that. But thanks God, everybody has learned from the past and knows that if a child has been with you for a while and the child is happy and the parents are happy, then why would you move them? Okay, so then they said, listen, and I still remember where I was because we knew it was going to court. And then I was going to the girlfriend's place and my husband called and he said, hey, listen, they just called. And I said, yes, what was the result? And he said, well, she's going into permanent care, which means until the age of 18. And they also asked if you wanted to adopt. And I was like, ah! So there we go. We didn't see it fully coming, but we were very happy to hear that. And look, it took another few years, but I know for a fact that it has now become more streamlined and it is a bit faster. You can actually now in New South Wales, you can become a potential authorized foster carer at the same time as a potential authorized adoptive parent. So that if a child, I would love for people to go into fostering thinking that they can help a child and that it's not necessarily permanent, because I really believe that all children, for their identity, for their culture, they should remain with birth family. We should never go into fostering thinking that, oh, the next kid is mine or something, because none of them are ours. At the end of the day, for me, they will always be the children of the birth parents. But if they cannot be reunited with birth family or extended family or cultural background family, then yes, then they should have permanency and they should know where they belong for the rest of their lives. And yeah, so we have a great relationship because also all adoptions in Australia are open adoptions, and I'm 150% behind that. So we have a good relationship with birth family, and they can see their daughter anytime. And yeah, I think it's also that our daughter is fairly settled with both daughters are fairly settled with the adoption process, and they know everything there is to know. We don't have any secrets, where there's nothing off limits. We talk about everything, and we include birth family as much as we can in everything. So there's no need to have any secrets on any side. So yeah, I think it's absolutely vital that children can ask questions and that we also try and make it work with birth family. I know it's not always that easy, and I know it's not all hunky-dory in a lot of adoptive families with contact, but if you can, then I mean, we are very lucky that we have a beautiful birth family that is very understanding of everything from all sides, so it's just like we like them, they like us, and it makes it a whole lot easier.
I just think that's so beautiful in listening to the fact that you even keep the whole process and the whole idea of the adoption is completely open, not just that you're like you hear from the past, like so many people, it was they didn't know they were adopted and where they come from. And the fact that you've been so open with both daughters and that they fully know their history and where they come from, I think that's absolutely beautiful. But also, what you were saying too about fostering, and that the idea that, yeah, we're not there to take these children away from their parents, whatever the circumstances the parents are going through. I've personally dealt a lot with that, being a police officer in my past and having to deal with foster children and crisis care and things like that. And you never want to tear a child away from its parents. But let's be real, we're human. We all go through some stuff, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. And there are circumstances where it's just not viable at the time for whatever reason. So kudos to you and your husband for actually stepping in and taking on that fostering role to give these children an opportunity to know what it's like to have a loving family, and that your children were so accepting and obviously showing them the way as well, that you are there for a short time to help guide these children, knowing that they're going to go back to their families with a whole new ideal of what there are as possibilities in life.
Yeah, but also, like you said, a lot of families, and I mean, I think we don't need to look so far. I mean, there's a lot of kids that are not in the foster care system and they have the same scenarios at home. And also, we probably all don't have to look too far. We all know somebody who has had an addiction problem, or somebody who had maybe mental health issues, or somebody who did the wrong thing and ended up incarcerated. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have to look too far to know somebody. If it's from school or from family or from, acquaintances, everybody knows somebody somewhere that has had the same kind of trouble. So the trouble is the same. It's just that very often they either go unnoticed, or they are not reported, or they are reported but not acted upon. So there are so many different reasons why a lot of kids should have ended up in other homes, but they didn't. And that's why I'm saying a lot of birth families just really need a break. And if the break is not the wake-up call to change things in their lives, and they cannot have a safe home for these kids, then yes, these kids deserve permanency. And if then guardianship or adoption is a better option for the child, just so that the child knows where they are for at least the first 18 years or however many years are still left until the age of 18, then so be it. So if we have so many, I mean, there are so many negative stories always about fostering, or here and there even about adoption. It's not all hunky-dory, yes, but we never look at all the hundreds and thousands of cases that are beautiful, happy ending stories, because those don't get reported. I mean, we have had so many kids where birth family got their, act together, if you want to call it that, and they turned their lives around, and they all got their kids back. That for me is a success story. That's why we fostered. Because all these people deserve to be with their children, just like the children need to be with their families. But if it is not safe, if it's not possible, then why should these kids move in the system again and again and again? Why not give them the permanency that actually gives them the peace and calm that they need?
I totally agree. Everyone deserves that second chance where possible. And the children, yeah, they deserve the chance to grow up in a loving, stable environment instead of having to deal with that old school. And I think it just surprises me with humanity that we are always so obsessed on the negative stories and we never ever give opportunity or enough opportunity to those positive stories, because like you said, I'm sure for every negative case there's probably multiple positive cases.
Plenty.
But no one ever, and for me, I would rather hear the positive outcome and the fact that these children are thriving in life and that the families are thriving than to hear about the sad story. And out of those, you said 80 plus children in 25 years, like that's just in my eyes, like, wow. But how many of those do you actually still keep in touch with? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, I don't really want to give anybody hope out there that you normally stay in touch. And I don't blame birth families, because very often we don't necessarily get their details, or they don't get our details anyway. So I don't blame birth families that maybe, had their kid taken and now they can start fresh. Who wants to be reminded of that time? So I totally get that. Here and there, I would wish that if kids move on, that we would have one or two more contacts, just so the kids understand that we are happy for them to move on. Because I think when they were very young, we had, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds that, yes, we packed the bags, and yes, they saw the bags go in the car, but they don't fully understand what's happening. Even if we try and explain it, they are sitting there waving, thinking, okay, I'll be back for dinner, and they don't fully understand it. And I do struggle with that. I do think that we should put more emphasis in actually letting us as foster carers, and also my kids and my husband, to see the child one more time, that they are settled, that they are happy in the new place, if it is extended family, if it is the future adoptive family, or if it is another foster family, that they actually understand that, hey, we didn't send you out because you were a bad kid. We are in good terms with you being there where you are. That it was, for cultural reasons, or it would be for, hey, it's a happy ending, you're going back to birth family. I would like more of that we get a chance to, just even if it's one more time, to actually say another kind of goodbye, just to say hi and how are you doing? It's all going great, okay. So that they see us smiling, that they see that, hey, we are happy where they are, and we're not, in any point negative that they left or whatever. So I think that is where I struggle here and there. That is not something that is being done, because it's all in the too hard basket in terms of manpower, whatever. Okay, they always have the reasons that children need to settle first, and yes, okay, they can settle, but 4 weeks later you can have one phone call, one FaceTime. It shouldn't be an issue, but it's so that is definitely something that I would change if I would be a caseworker, because I think it's important for the child as it is for foster families, and maybe even for birth families, to see that, hey, we're all leaving on good terms and we're happy with the outcome. And otherwise, we are very lucky, because twice we have had a chance to stay in contact, but that's because of our own doing. We had one baby, she was 1 week old when she came to us, and she stayed with us for 13 months. So we're very much a big part of her first year. And she then moved on to grandma, who is a lovely lady, and her partner. And yeah, that's she's in another state, and we see her regularly. And that is really, they from day one they said, listen, you've been such a big part of her life from day one. We want to stay in touch. We're going to be extended family, and they've kept their word. So we are, and that's really really nice. And also one child that we were fostering in Singapore when we actually had no kids yet. He was 13 at that point in time, and he is now 33. And he actually just got married last month in Malaysia, and we flew over and represented, his family as mom and dad.
Oh,
So
wow. That's such a beautiful, like a beautiful connection to have, to think that 20 years ago when you took this child on in a fostering situation and you gave him a safe space, to then invite you back to his wedding to acknowledge you and the difference you made in his life. Like, I have no words for that. Like, that's just beautiful.
well, so that's what it's all about. We're just hoping that we make a difference, and that was one way of hearing that. Yes, actually, you did. So yeah, but it's not normal. We are normally, I don't want to give anybody hope that if they are fostering, I'm thinking, out of the 80, I would hope that one or two, maybe one day, look us up. Even if they were too small to remember names and whatever, they could, eventually one day maybe check their files. And because once kids turn 18, they have a right to see their files, and then maybe somebody will eventually knock on our door and say, hey, do you remember me? So I've kept everybody's photos. I've got a file for each child, so in case all that went lost somewhere in the system, then I have a copy of that for the kids. So who knows? Okay, so I don't keep my hopes up when kids leave that we will stay in touch. It has worked twice, so we feel very blessed and happy with that. But it's not normal. No, you normally don't stay in touch. You don't hear from them again until, like I said, they maybe grow older, and with social media they can find us. Oh, who knows? Maybe this podcast brings up something in somebody.
You just
Who
never
knows?
know.
There we
The
go.
the other question I was going to ask you is, at any time during that last 25 years, have you had to deal with scenarios with children that you're like, oh, I don't know about this one? Like, I understand that you're caring for the child, but there was something involved in the case, without going into details, that you're like, oh, this is a tough one.
I don't think anything can shock me anymore. I think that, when you have kids, we always ask children at the very beginning when they come the first night, we always say, do you want the door open? Do you want it closed? Do you want a night light on? Do you want a night light in your room? Whatever. And if a child then answers, close the door, all lights off, that rings alarm bells. Then you know that, okay, there will be more coming. And yeah, sure enough. So for me, when children disclose, it's really hard to comprehend what so many young kids have to go through. And I'm not excusing anybody's behavior towards kids. I think we just have to listen to the news, open the newspapers if anybody still physically does. And, we hear all kinds of terrible, terrible stories. I mean, there's so much going on with, you know, on social media and everywhere else where kids get exploited in so many ways. But it doesn't mean that their past defines them. It doesn't mean that they cannot have a change in their life. And if they just see what a new routine, I mean, when I have asked kids to put their school bag there and to put things there, and it's like, oh, in the past we didn't have to do that. It's like, okay, and how did that work? Hmm, not so good. I was like, there we go. So, it's like when they come with certain um, past behaviors, or even, if it comes to cleanliness, I mean, even the 13-year-old he had one set of uniforms in Singapore, so you could imagine the smell. And then when I gave him fresh uniform for each day and I ironed his shirts and, I said, you got to take a shower every day here at Singapore. You're going to be sweating. Oh, no, I don't. And I said, well, I would really like for you to do so. And then it was beautiful to see that, when my husband gave him an aftershave, he just would spend such long times in the bathroom just getting himself all nice and clean and put the aftershave on because he realized it made a difference at school. People would actually sit with him now because he didn't smell. They would actually play with him because he didn't smell. It's things like that where the kids then realize that things can also be different, but they just didn't know because whatever you grow up with, you think that that's the norm, that's normal. And until you are then invited to other people's houses, which many of these kids, they come here, I take them to school, and when I say, oh, you like this guy? Do you want to have a play date? Play date? What's that? They've never had play dates. They've never taken kids home. They've never been to birthday parties, so all the things that we take for granted, that we think is the norm in a child's life, no, it's not for many of them. I've had a 3-year-old with absolutely rotten teeth, and all he would live off is lollies and packaged food, and it took us 6 weeks to get him to eat rice, plain noodles cooked. Uh, and then to ask him to please use a toothbrush. Toothbrush? What's that? So we've really started the absolute basics where you think in a country like Australia, we have kids that don't brush their teeth. I mean, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, it just, every time it hit me when these kids would be so surprised with things and not it's just, for me, that's normal and it's the basics in a family life, but for many of them it's not.
I totally get that. From two perspectives, the two things I want to say about that is, one, we do take for granted the kind of lifestyle we grow up in and what we do take for granted, because we forget that our environment shapes us so much. And when we are surrounded with that love and support and connection and good behaviors and the right or correct way of doing things, however you look at that, that we do take for granted that there are people out there that just don't have that. And the second thing I want to say is that I've seen that firsthand myself as a police officer. When you are going into some of these situations and some of these incidents and even some of these communities, that you're like, whoa, your eyes are really opened to what children are exposed to. And it's cruel sometimes.
It's cruel many times, many times. I mean, we were once watching the news and they showed a drug bust. And I mean, we had the kids sitting there and say, oh, yeah, that's what we always had at home. Oh, yeah. Oh, we know all about drugs and we know about the needles and we know about the things. And, here's a 4 and 5-year-old talking. So it's like, oops, okay, let's change the channel.
Yeah, and it's a whole different level of communication that you just think, yeah, that's not for children to watch or see, and yet they've already been exposed to it so much in their lives. And, I just think the idea of like fostering and providing this safe, loving, caring, supportive environment is such a beautiful gift that you are paying forward, I think, in ways that you don't even understand the ripple effect yourself of the difference of the children's lives you're making.
We try our best. I mean, we don't always get it right, that's for sure. But I would like to know the perfect parent out there. I don't think any of us have ever had perfect parents, and I don't think any of us will ever be perfect parents. So we all do the best that we can do at the time with the resources and the knowledge that we have. I also wish that I would have known a lot of things prior to starting the fostering. That's why I also now run information seminars to educate others on just being more trauma informed, to really understand what trauma also means. That's why I would love to do presentations at police, at schools, because if we could really just understand what it means if a child steals the lunch of another child. Let's not be punitive. Let's actually look at why he's stealing the food. What was his past? What was his behavior of hoarding food? Because, hey, even if he now has the food at home, it doesn't mean that he's not maybe saving something for the rainy day just in case it happens again. So we need to really always look from a trauma perspective on why kids have the behaviors that they have, because like I said, every unwanted behavior is an unmet need, and we need to find out what the needs are. It doesn't justify everything, but it explains a lot, and if we go with a different approach, then we can have a huge impact.
I totally agree, and I think that's a forgotten thing within society that, like you said, and I'm not going to be able to paraphrase it the same way, but yeah, what's happening at the end is not what actually is going on behind the scenes. And I too often have seen that as a police officer and can see that, we're just a band-aid fix at the end of the line. We're not looking back to how we actually got here, but nobody wants to go back and fix what happened in the beginning. And we judge people, and especially children, like under the age of 10, like legally children under the age of 10 are not legally able to understand what their behaviors are, and yet we question children as to, you shouldn't be doing that, you're not supposed to do this, how dare you do that? And yet these kids that you've probably have fostered, many of them like it, are in this situation where they don't know any different. And so then they become over the age of 10 and they're still doing the same behaviour they did under 10, but they've had no one to teach them, well, that's not the correct or right way of doing it. There is an alternative. And so we're then judging these, 10 to 18-year-olds or even young adults that are causing issues within their communities, within their support network, that are actually derived from childhood trauma.
Yeah.
But no one wants to acknowledge that. No one wants to deal with that. We just want to say you're a bad adult, you're a bad child, you should know better. But what if they don't?
Yeah, and also they can't just snap out of it. So it's not just like, oh, but now you're in a safe environment, so just don't do this. They have to feel emotionally safe. Just because they are physically safe doesn't mean that they are already emotionally safe. So they want to see, would you stick with them through good times, through bad times? What if things don't, I've had kids where I said, oh, what do you want to do for your birthday in 2 weeks? Who knows where we'll be? Okay, so let's just assume you're here. So, that's how much they trust the future, because they've moved so much, they've been moved around without being asked. It's like, just because they are safe right now does not mean that they feel emotionally safe. Just because they have enough food right now doesn't mean that they don't worry about food for the future. So these things cannot be just shifted overnight. Trust needs to be built, trust in the whole situation. You're saying that I'm safe, but how do I know I'm really safe? I don't feel safe at the moment. I don't, just because you tell me doesn't mean anything yet. I don't trust nobody. And you got to build that trust. And that goes for teachers, that goes for police officers, that goes for birth family, that goes for foster family, the caseworker, it goes for everybody. So, it's not that simple. And intergenerational trauma, that is, again, also another story. So the pain that has been endured by so many when there's intergenerational trauma is also not easily fixed. And if alcohol or drugs are part of it, it's an addiction, it's a sickness, it's not something that you snap out of so easily either. So, and just because, family have tried and tried again, it doesn't mean that each time they will be successful, and it doesn't mean that they don't have the best intentions. I will never say that birth families don't love their children. They do, but they are struggling themselves, and it's not easy. It's not easy. But if we can be here for them to have the time and the space and, the awareness that, hey, wow, okay, this is getting serious now. They took my kids. I need to do something. I need to step up here. I need to really, really get everything back in order to have my kids back, then yes, they should have their kids back. But if it's not possible, then we need to make sure that these kids can stay somewhere where they know that, hey, somebody is there and has their back no matter what.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're talking about with the workshops that you run, like the trauma workshops, are they hosted in person in the Sydney area or are they hosted online? Like, how can people basically get in touch with you if they're experiencing something? Like, my listeners are obviously international, but focusing on Australia. What sort of services are there out there?
Well, I'm first of all also a certified life coach, so I can do sessions over the phone with anybody who wants some support and who wants to work through things. And then I'm a licensed Louise Hay facilitator for the workshop Heal Your Life. And that's done in person. It's actually 2 full intense days, but they're incredible, and absolutely transformational. It's just so beautiful to see how people come out and feel so inspired to just be more at peace with themselves and to just let go of all the emotions, all the things from the past that don't serve them. So I do run them here in Sydney. I'm actually just in talks to finalize all the dates. I hope that I have found a venue. I'm just waiting to hear back because that's actually my issue. If anybody listening has a venue that I can have for 2 full days, that is my issue, to find something that is not super expensive so that I can make these workshops as cheap as possible so that anybody can attend. And I'm also actually in talks with a really good friend of mine in Fremantle. So since you told me that you're in Western Australia, I would love to come up there and hold it there. So we're looking for a venue now as well and see if we can find that. And then I would love to run it there. And anywhere else actually in Australia, anybody that has maybe a group of 8, 10 people, I'm happy to fly up and create a workshop there. So it's so simple. And yet, once we understand how the brain also heals, I've done neuro change programs. I'm a neuro change practitioner. I'm also a neuro health practitioner. I've got background also with knowledge in mental health. I teach the Bachelor of Counseling and the diploma in community services, mental health, and counseling. So I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who wants one-on-one sessions, but the in person are great. And I also have a Louise Hay program for 5 weeks that is online modules where we meet once a week and just talk about subjects like healthy boundaries, deservability, because we all grow up with different perceptions on it. Some get told as a child you deserve a smack, and others, oh, you only deserve the best. So there's a big difference there, and we talk about what actually maybe we have had in our childhoods that we could let go of, and also the limiting beliefs that actually hold us back to achieve great things. So I'm all about self-esteem, self-confidence, and just really personal development in general.
I love that you've taken your experience over the last 25 years of working with children in the fostering and adoption area, raising 3 beautiful children of your own, that you are now giving back to the community in a way that will help them through their trauma as well. So I will pop all your details in the show notes so that people can reach out if that's something they are interested in.
Thank you. I'm also happy to offer you, I've done 3 books on the topic of fostering and adoption, and I'll send all 3 through to you. And if you want to share it with anybody, feel free. And anybody that contacts me and says, yes, okay, send me through the ebooks, I'll send them through for free.
I love that. That's so generous of you. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful hearing your story, hearing the vulnerable shares that you've given today, and I'm sure so many listeners will relate on so many different levels.
I hope so. And if we can find more people out there that open up their homes, I know fostering is not for everybody, but whoever feels that, if they're single and they want to have kids in their home, if they are a couple, and if infertility is an issue or not, if they have kids already or not, or if they are from same-sex, LGBTQ plus community, anybody who would like to have kids in their homes, come forward, say, hey, we would like to provide a home for a kid in need. We need you desperately. We've got kids in, motel rooms and caravan parks that should really be at the dinner table in a home.
Thank you so much for today. And I always love to finish by asking my guests, what is the one thing you are most grateful for today?
Just being here, living in a peaceful country. I think at the moment, when you look around on what happens every day and you open up the news and you see these kids, I really look more at the kids than anybody else. And you see these empty looks of, horror and hatred and pain. It's just really to be in a country where we can all live peacefully if we keep it peaceful. And just be there more for one another. Hate doesn't solve anything. We need to be there for one another and teach these kids that hate is not the solution. We need to love and embrace each other. Doesn't matter what race, what religion. We need to just be there for one another.
Thank you for tuning in to the Everyday Warriors podcast. If you have an idea for a future episode or a story you'd like to share yourself, then please reach out and message me, as I am always up for real, raw and authentic conversations with other everyday warriors. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can download all the latest episodes as they are published, and spread the word to your family and friends and colleagues so they can listen in too. If you're sharing on social media, please be sure to tag me so that I can personally acknowledge you. I'm always open to comment about how these episodes have resonated with you, the listener. And remember, lead with love as you live this one wild and precious life.